controlled for a variety of possibly confounding factors like demographics and mental health and chronic medical conditions. And they have found that all by itself, purpose appears to have a potent ability to extend and improve our lives. So it's not only that healthy people find purpose. Apparently, purpose helps you stay healthier and more engaged. If purpose were a drug, we would all be asking for a prescription. But it is not a pill. So how can we encourage and enable elders to hang on to a sense of purpose when their children have grown or flown and their work lives are winding down? Because isn't that one of the most disturbing things about visiting very elderly and frail people in nursing homes or largely shut in their own homes? They may often actually say that they have no reason to live. And nobody can have a good life who feels that way. So I think baby boomers will find various ways to preserve purpose. Some will continue working if they have work that they find meaningful, because a 70-year-old now might be more vital than a 55-year-old was 40 years ago. And because if they're good at what they do and they like it, they don't see a reason to stop. Some will find ways to not relinquish, but just to reduce work. Some will launch what are called encore careers, doing something different than they've done all their working lives. Or they might turn to self-expression, to the art or photography or music that they never felt that they had time for earlier in life. They may return to school, formally or informally. Senior U, Concordia College. This is really exciting. I just heard about it 10 minutes ago. But the need, lifelong learning. I teach graduate students, and I had a student last semester who was in her 60s, who was doing great work and was having a blast. I would like more students like that. Or elders may be helping their families in various ways, because young families need a lot of support these days. And of course, because our parents and other older relatives also tend to live longer, and so many will have elder care responsibilities, and we do have old people taking care of older people. Or people will work without compensation as volunteers and activists for programs and causes that they find important. And I'd like to focus on that for a moment, because earlier I was listing all the ways that, that purpose can benefit us individually, our physical health, our cognitive ability, our happiness, our wallets, and it can. But I also see purposeful older adults as a resource, a form of social capital that can be tapped for the common good. Old people are not just a problem to be solved. Old people can change the world. So let's ask ourselves, are our communities all that we wish they were? Our towns, our states? Is our country what we want it to be? Is the state of our world acceptable to us? Well, then let's consider the approximately 74 million Americans who make up the baby boom. Its older members, I am one, are in their 70s. Well, I'm not quite there, but I am getting there. And the youngest are in their 50s. So this is the next big cohort. And it's the biggest cohort of older adults that there has ever been in this country and also around the world. And it is a better educated and more technologically advanced older generation than we have ever seen. And yes, we want recreation, and we want to take care of ourselves, but what else? They are going to be looking for ways to feel engaged, to make a contribution, as the rabbi said. They want and need to have purpose. That does not go away when you get your Medicare card. So can't we find ways to harness that power? Elders can be mentors and advisors, passing along what they know. For example, there's a technology organization called Aging 2.0. It has noticed that half of the 27-year-olds in Silicon Valley have come up with some great new gizmo or app for the elderly. And because young entrepreneurs can read the census data as well as anybody else, and they see where the people are, and they see where a lot of the disposable income is as well. So Aging 2.0 is inviting entrepreneurs to pitch their ideas in assisted living communities. And it's also recruiting elders to serve on panels that help evaluate new products. And boy, do they need people to help them evaluate those new products. Because no gadget that has a black on gray screen and 20 little tiny buttons that you can't read is ever really going to solve a problem for the older population. So I think it's a great idea. I'm also thinking about a program you might have heard of called Experience Corps, founded in Baltimore by people at Johns Hopkins. It brought older people into public elementary schools 15 hours a week to assist in classrooms and libraries and read to kids. This was not a make-work project. You had to go through 32 hours of training to be an Experience Corps member. And the follow-up research showed significant improvements in literacy for children in poverty neighborhoods. But that was, of course, not the only payoff. A Hopkins neuropsychologist tested the cognition of women Experience Corps volunteers in their 60s. And these were women who were already at risk for cognitive loss. They did not have a lot of education. They had low income. And yet after 6 months in the schools working with kids, their improvement on cognitive tests improved markedly too. And MRIs even showed improvements in brain activity. So Experience Corps is now affiliated with AARP. It's working in 23 cities, but the only one in New York State is in Buffalo. So this is a county, I am told, that despite its out-migration, has 193,000 older adults. And yes, we do want to be sure that they are cared for when they need care and that they can age with dignity and security, and you have a really impressive roster of programs to help achieve that. But don't we also need their experience and their knowledge and their assistance? It's true that helping older people find purpose requires some thoughtfulness. Leaders of nonprofit and educational organizations know it takes planning, and sometimes it takes money to actually recruit and effectively use and retain volunteers. You can't just wait for people to show up. You have to know what to do with them. And you have to help them find satisfaction. So in Baltimore, for example, Experience Corps provided small stipends to volunteers. So then were they really volunteers? Well, it was a very small fee, but it underscored the importance of their effort and the value that was placed on it. And the program helped transport them to the schools. And I would think in an area like this, transportation would be pretty key. It helps, I think, to think of any kind of social program or volunteer opportunity or workplace as having bi-directional impact, or maybe omnidirectional impact. The value flows in both directions. So the older volunteers or participants or fundraisers or workers provide a service. And then the organization also benefits those people by helping them keep their sense of purpose or develop a sense of purpose. Further, let's consider that elders have shown that they can be a potent political force. They register to vote in much higher percentages than other age groups, and then they vote. I mean, people in their 90s will get themselves to the polls if they can't get themselves anywhere else. And I'm, in fact, convinced that that is the only reason that Social Security and Medicare still exist.
Right.
So if people in Westchester are concerned about the environment, about education, about guns, about economic inequality, about racial inequality, about criminal justice, you name it, there could be organizations of politically engaged older voters tackling those problems, riding buses to Albany or Washington to meet with their elected representatives. And even elders with limited mobility could be part of that. Because how do we bring change in this country? You call your representatives, you write letters, you send email, you send postcards, you get other people to do that too, you go to meetings, you make phone calls. And so what people need to get involved in that, if they're not already involved, is just people thinking about how do we bring them into the picture. This is a coming generation of elders, my generation, that already has wrought great changes in America. Why should we stop now? We have other speakers on the agenda, and we're going to engage in some discussion and some questions. But before I yield the floor, I would like to make my personal pitch here, because I would like to enlist all of us, whatever our ages, collectively, in fighting ageism where we find it. I want us to be advocates for ourselves and our seniors. I want that to be part of our purpose. Because recognized or not, ageism is a pernicious force. It makes elders feel useless. It makes us feel dismissed. It robs us of our sense of purpose. And of course, like many other forms of prejudice, its victims are not immune to it themselves. So I'm sure everyone has had some experience with an 80-year-old declaring that he will not go to a senior center, or she will not move into assisted living because there are all those old people there. Well, speaking as one of those old people, every time we make a self-deprecating joke about senior moments, every time we call ourselves some diminishing word, like biddies, like geezers, we are saying that we don't deserve respect, and we are harming ourselves. And we're not even telling the truth. Yeah, I forget stuff, and so do my students in their 20s and 30s with far less excuse. In fact, I'm always delighted when one of them, some 26-year-old says, "Oh, I forgot our meeting." Yes. Oh, that's okay. I understand how that could happen. And yeah, my hearing is less acute than it used to be. And I think that's probably a problem that's going to face every teenage guitarist in a rock band and everybody who goes through their entire day with earbuds in their ears. Mm-hmm. These are issues we have to deal with, but they're not limited by age. So I would like us to stop apologizing for being the ages that we are. I want us to stop being ashamed of our faces, our bodies, our natural hair color. I want us to stop using euphemisms. I don't need to be called a senior citizen. Do not call me a golden ager. For God's sake, do not say I am 60 years young. I am not young. To call me an old person is fine because it's true and because it's okay to be old. So that's part of my purpose, and I invite you to join my little crusade. You don't have to take out a formal membership. There's no oath you have to take. You just need to start speaking out. This is probably the last acceptable form of prejudice that people can say out loud, and I would like it to be the last acceptable form. So on that note, I will yield the floor, and we'll continue to discuss purpose. It's a vital subject, and one that we are continuing to learn more about. I'm so glad you're exploring it. I'm really honored to be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Do either of you have a question for her yet? Thank you, Paula. Something that I should have explained before she got up there was the order of the day. She spoke. We're going to, debrief. Imagine that we're sitting at a sofa with mismatched cups of coffee, and at the Osborne. Really, really nice paintings and everything like that. So, but we're going to do that for 5 minutes. It's, a free-for-all among us. But, right, maybe I'll just get us started by one question to start you out. First of all, I forgot what it was.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm 26. So most of us here are agency people. We work in an office and we do programs. Senior programs of WJCS, Department of Senior Programs, Services, etc. Some of us do consulting and other things like that, but most of us are designing things top down. And the energy that you are describing, this potential kinetic energy to really move the dial, is something that comes from really deep inside individuals and gets expressed usually in their personal predilections, what they're really fascinated by and what really irks them and what they're passionate about. How do we as professionals make that connection? Where can our rubber meet the road or the other way around?
Well, I think you ask them, what's important to you? What do you need that you don't have? What use would you like to make with your time that I can help facilitate? What are the roadblocks? And this is a science in itself that I don't know how you do it, but I know that there are ways to do it. There's questionnaires, there's focus groups, there's going to groups that already exist and asking them what they need. And I think successful programs do this because trying to put yourself in somebody else's brain and figure out what they want is kind of a doomed exercise. And we're talking about a very diverse population, you know, with all kinds of issues, all kinds of struggles, all kinds of interests. So there's not going to be a program or an effort or initiative that speaks to everybody. So I don't think there's a substitute for going out with teams of people and asking the questions.
Kind of a listening campaign.
Oh, they have their own mics, I guess.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's on, but.
Is it on? Yeah. Thank you. I loved everything you said.
Oh, great.
Absolutely everything. So I'm going to make a little plug here for the meditation groups that I lead. I lead 2 groups a week, and most of the participants are people in their 60s and above who have never meditated before. And part of what we do, besides doing some, and I'll talk later about that, you'll have an experience of that, but we do some meditation together and then we talk. What's our experience? How is this impacting your life? So on and so forth. The group has been meeting now, started 8 years ago. And we usually run about 15 to 25 people a session. It makes me so happy to see what develops from that group. As people talk to each other, well, I'm dealing with this in my life, and I realized, hey, I don't have to think about it that way. I could, instead of worrying about the way my grandson is driving, or, you know, if he's coming home late, maybe I can take a breath, realize that the worry isn't helping me, and I can shift gears to, let me imagine him coming home safe and sound. Let him come back with, I'll send him a blessing or a prayer for him. In sharing the personal lives, there's a community that has formed there. Because we're not just talking movies, we're talking our lives. And out of that has come a monthly luncheon, a monthly book group, and a couple of people who say, I'm going to the march on the 24th to support gun control. How many of you want to come with me? And it is just naturally happening. Like livable communities, you join together and things begin to percolate. So that's just sort of a natural environment of that. And I'm thrilled that that happens there.
You know, I think it's so much of what you just said, it, tying into what you were saying, it's sort of like, you started the talk by saying, you know, when you're young, these things come natural, right? Life is sort of spelled out on some level for you. But then once the kids are gone and it's maybe just you're empty nesting or maybe your spouse has passed, and it's like, where do you go? How do you get to that next step? And so I think part of what you're saying is that when you create the space, people go and do what people do. Right? And so you've just given so many examples nationwide, and when you guys were talking about the fact that people come to you from other countries, in a way it's kind of funny, right? All we're saying is put old people in a room together and they'll figure it out on some level, right? Like maybe we've made it a little bit more complicated, but when we have to put a curtain over it because we don't want to talk about it and it's kind of the taboo and it's really important to stay young, then you don't embrace that the same. So I think you're just shedding quite a bit of light on that.
Good. So I guess the things I'm left with for now, until I invite Carrie up to the podium, are how do we create those, how do we, who are agency people, create those spaces? Or how do we already use what we have to open up the channels to really finding direction? And how do we do that without necessarily having a camera crew there, you know, an invasive kind of, you're not invasive. And then how do we harness that? How do we give those people the tools once they have determined the direction that they'd like to see their lives go?
Do you want to use a different mic?
Yeah. Okay. We'll leave it there for now. I can turn this one on. Yeah. And I'm going to invite to the podium Carrie Mills. Okay.
Oh, just
In my
use
own
one
work,
mic.
helping people to address the spiritual needs of people with dementia and their care partners. Care partner is a word that I learned from, term that I learned from Carrie, because they are partners rather than I'm the giver and you're the receiver. I've experienced Carrie to be a real ally, a colleague, and a kindred spirit. One of the wonderful things about the mission of Engaging Alzheimer's is that she really considers it her life's work to share the ways in which people with dementia continue to create meaning in their own lives, and to show the rest of us that the process of doing that does not stop once a person gets a little bit of cognitive impairment. She does that on the ground with home health aides, with children of, with spouses of, with administrators, with all walks of life in the circle of aging. And so it's with great pleasure that I welcome the founding director of Engaging Alzheimer's, Carrie Mills, to the podium.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you guys noticed, but every single person who came up who had like a minute, everyone was like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I just had to say, it's it's fitting that we'll finish with mindfulness, but it's a really grateful group. Did anyone else notice that? I hope you guys feel as grateful as everybody here feels about you guys being here. It's perfect to build off of everything that Paula just said, because everything she said doesn't stop because you have dementia, right? So it's kind of just this very fitting transition. And, a lot of times we look at people with dementia and we think nothing about their world makes sense to us, right? And I hear a lot of people say, gee, if only I could know what they were thinking. And I think to myself, as much as I don't know what you're thinking and you don't know what I'm thinking, we're really in that same boat with them. But of course, we want to understand what they're thinking so that we can help them. I think that's the genuine interest that people behind of why they would want to know, right? But part of it is that they're not like completely out to lunch, right? We tend to think of people with dementia as just confused all the time. We think that there's no reason why they do things. We have words like wandering and other things that just make them seem like, they're back in the 70s, hooked up on tons of drugs, and now this is just the aftermath of it. And that might be you guys, because, she said you guys were the baby boomers, so no judgment, right? Downside to being one of the younger people in the room. And so the reality is that people with dementia, they're like you and I. And in fact, most of the reasons why they do what they're doing is actually because they have a reason that they're doing it. So take somebody who wants to walk out of the house at 3 o'clock in the morning after they've just gotten dressed for the day. They're not doing it because they're confused. They're doing it because their sense of time is a bit off. They're doing it because they don't remember that they're not working anymore. But the reality is they did the same thing that you did this morning, because I don't see anybody here in your pajamas. Right? All of you look like you took care of yourselves this morning, and we did that despite our weather, right? So the reasons why they do things have the same underlying push that you and I have, right? There's some intention behind what they're doing. The whole notion of purpose is just that there's a reason. There's a reason why they do what they do, right? So the first thing I just wanted to do was to give them a pass, that when they do things that you don't understand, doesn't mean that it's all their fault. It just means that you don't understand it the same way that your spouse does stuff and you're like, I just don't get it. I don't get why he does that. And you've been married to him for 40 years and you still don't get it, right? And yet you're not sitting there calling him all kinds of names, and we don't have to have symposiums about him, right? I mean, maybe you wish that you had that. I don't know. But so again, the reason in which they are motivated to do anything is purpose.